The chaplains are the spiritual leaders of the Space Marine chapters and companies, looking after their battle brothers' psychological and spiritual well-being. On the battlefield, they act as warrior priests, raising the morale and spurring their battle brothers into a furious rage against the enemies of the Emperor. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we are covering the chaplains, the spiritual leaders of the Space Marines, with the standard chaplain today. So, the standard chaplain comes in at a rock-bottom price of 60 points, which is quite cheap. His stats are pretty solid for that cost. He moves 6 inches, toughness 4, a 3+ save, a 4+ invulnerable from his Rosarius, 4 wounds, leadership 5+, and OC 1, making him slightly tougher than a Space Marine lieutenant, who costs a few points more. He only has his sort of standard loadout, which is his heavy Absolver bolt pistol, which is one attack that hits on 2s at 18-inch range, strength 5, AP 1, and damage 2. Then he also carries, of course, a Crozius Arcanum, his big staff of office, which has 5 attacks that hit on 2s at strength 6, AP 1, and damage 2. These are both solid enough weapons. The Absolver bolt pistol sort of acts like a deagle, sort of. It's good at popping a Space Marine or maybe a guardsman. Then the Arcanum, Crozius Arcanum is a very solid melee weapon that is pretty good against most infantry targets. Now, his Recitation of Faith means once per battle, at the start of any phase, you can select a friendly Astartes unit within 12 inches that is battle-shocked. That unit is no longer battle-shocked. This is a solid enough rule that when it comes into play will be very impactful for winning the secondary game, but isn't the most powerful and is very matchup dependent. I did also forget to mention his Leadership 5+ is higher than usual, which does mean his unit will be very resilient to battle shock. Then his main buffing role, which you're getting for those 60 points, is very powerful. Litany of Hate means while this model leads a unit, each time that unit makes a melee attack, add 1 to the wound roll. +1 to wound is extremely powerful, and being able to get this on any of the Mark 10 squads is of course very useful, though this is only in melee, so while he can lead some ranged units, it's better to leave those to the other leaders. Overall, this is a great package for 60 points, and in general is going to be a solid unit that takes buffs very well, especially from enhancements or otherwise. So as I mentioned already, the Chaplain is about as cheap as a character gets at only 60 points, and his buffing role is not bad in any way. +1 to wound, as I mentioned, is extremely useful and very easy to use. Simply charge into something and you will be more effective against it by a large margin. It helps you to punch down against hordes and also to punch up against things like super tough vehicles. While this pairs well with all of the melee units, really, the one that comes to mind first as a very interesting option at the very least is Assault Intercessors, since they get to reroll wounds when they're fighting something on objectives. With this guy in tow means they're getting +1 to wound and rerolling all wounds, which means they're very, very effective against most targets, but they still are held back by that low AP. But in detachments like Gladius Strike Force, or Gladius Task Force rather, you can get +1 AP for just 1 CP. Though the Chaplain is never going to be bad in any of the other units, things like Blade Guard veterans really appreciate the +1 to wound, which also extends to Inner Circle companions, so I think he's quite solid with both, though he may want a battlefield bust to get him there when he's leading them. Though he can lead things like Hellblasters and Stern Guard veterans, I would recommend leaving that for lieutenants or captains, as they're much better for that sort of situation, as he gives no buffs to range, and they don't want to be in melee generally, and his melee isn't really much to add as a countercharge threat. Bring a lieutenant in that way. As I mentioned, his leadership buff is minor, but it will be impactful when it happens, as it can be useful to flip an objective, or in general just to keep your units from losing objectives or not being able to use stratagems. In terms of other detachments, his buff isn't quite as useful in Inner Circle companions, as they get +1 to wound in a lot of situations, though in places like Sons of Sanguinius they will be extremely effective with +1 to wound going even further in that detachment, especially with Assault Intercessors with their +2 strength. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling, I hope you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.